What claims are just not backed by the historical facts? That ancient people thought the earth was flat. We have records from around 430 BC where Greek philosophers spoke of the earth being a sphere. In 240 BC, the Greek astronomer Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth and was only about 2% out. There are modern people who think the earth is flat and they can read. Not very well, though. Science, and as can be seen from the evidence, it is clear that the earth is flat claim is disproven. Flat earthers. See, even science says that it is clear that the earth is flat. I'm sick of curriculum materials teaching my 4th graders that the Spanish discovered Florida when they were looking for the Fountain of Youth. That lie was developed in the 1920s as a tourist gimmick. There's literally nothing in the historical record that supports it. Half true. Ponce de Leon trying to find the Fountain of Youth is a myth, but it was first mentioned shortly after he died in the 1500s. This is usually attached to Florida because it was the first place in the contiguous US that Ponce de Leon claimed Bosch discovered. The myth was a thing throughout the Age of Discovery. This was then repopularized in the 1900s to encourage people to visit Florida. Marilyn Monroe never said, "If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best." There is literally no documented proof she ever said that. True, she actually said, "If you can't handle me at my diddliest, you don't deserve me at my doodliest." That binary numbers were first used by Leibniz. Most computer histories make this claim, but there's an existing manuscript page by the English mathematician Thomas Harriot that includes binary numbers and binary multiplication that was written around 1605, 40 years before Leibniz was born. Edit, spelling. The idea that medieval or early modern people, especially peasants, were filthy or had poor hygiene and never left their villages. Medieval people cleaned themselves and their clothes fairly regularly. They even cleaned their teeth by chewing split twigs. Also, it was fairly common even for peasants to travel to pilgrimage sites on holy days or periods. Yes, I just commented this as a main comment, but they also did not drink beer because the water was dirty. People have known for thousands of years how to keep shit out of their water supply. It's like a cornerstone of civilization. Snobs during the Enlightenment decided to rewrite some things and creates the whole Dark Ages mythology. Exactly. Also, you need clean-ish water to create beer anyway. In towns, certainly it was safer to drink the beer, but most of the population lived rurally anyway, so it didn't matter one way or another. The reason why so many people drank beer is that it's calorific and was easy to make at home, and every homestead did make their own beer. In other words, it provided cheap sustenance for long days of manual labor. Also, as they do now, people like getting drunk. That the pyramids were built by Jewish slaves. The Egyptians were good at record keeping, and none of their records say anything about slaves being used for the construction of the pyramids. For what it's worth, the Old Testament does not say that the pyramids were built by the Jews. The Jews do not believe that the pyramids were built by the Jews. I have no idea where this bit of nonsense comes from. It's not in the Ten Commandments film either, even though the film took enormous liberties with the biblical account. Not to say that the biblical account is actual history either. Edit. The comment referred to the Jews having built the pyramids, and I responded to that. Kindly do not accuse me of saying something I did not say. The biblical account refers to 2 grain storage cities. You may dispute the historical veracity of that or not, as you wish. You may dispute the historical veracity of the Book of Exodus, the Old Testament, or the entire Bible or not, as you wish. But please do not say that I stated that the Jews did build the pyramids. I did not. Vomitoria were passages designed to accommodate large crowds, not rooms for actual vomiting. Vomit comes from Latin for spew forth. I thought that didn't sound right. The passage would vomit out the large crowd. That's so interesting, thank you. Einstein being a low-level student, his grades were average to top tier of the class, and he was pretty damn good academically. Part of the reason this myth came about is that in Germany, 1 is the best grade and 6 is the worst grade. In Switzerland, where he went to school, it is exactly the other way around, and 6 is the best grade. Young Earth creationism is not the historically believed position of the early Christian church or the ancient church. It's a fairly recent theological position initially purported by Seventh-day Adventists, but quickly became popular with fundamentalists due to backlash over evolution becoming mainstream. Before that, most people saw the creation narrative in Genesis as a narrative myth and was not meant to be read as scientific fact. Some dude in the late 1700s tried to count the years in the stories of the Bible and calculated the first year of creating to be the 4004 BCE. Now, creationists insist the Earth is 6,000 years old, and they have science to back it up. And you're right, the rise in young Earth creationism was mainly a response to Darwin and other scientific discoverers explaining away creation myths. no so much a single historical fact, but people tend to fall for fallacies of nature and imply that we should go back to the way we did things naturally. But oftentimes, this idea is extremely historically inaccurate. Many times, the way we did things naturally resulted in a lot of, death. For example, giving birth naturally. Some people seem to think that before modern obstetrics, that we were all just a bunch of natural goddesses giving birth in the forest. But the reality was a lot more grotesque than that. If everyone gave birth the way we did in 1900, we would be seeing a lot more childbirth-related death. We would also see a lot more women dealing with fistulas and being ostracized. Same with vaccines. Letting nature take its course killed us, sometimes at alarming rates, like with smallpox. Oh sure, they had natural immunity to a lot of things, just like we develop natural immunity to a lot of things, except some immunities are a lot safer to get naturally. You don't just develop natural immunity to polio, you have to get polio and suffer the permanent natural consequences. But people have this idea that everyone used to walk around with better immune systems, and they would drink elderberry. The White Star Line saying the Titanic was unsinkable. It was actually a shipping magazine that first called the Olympic class unsinkable. In a similar note, the RMS Britannic being called gigantic. The name gigantic only appears once on an order for an anchor. Every other piece of documentation refers to the Britannic as the Britannic. Executioners or hangmen didn't wear hoods. People knew who they were. There are even several instances where the job gets passed from father to son, like a family business. They were paid okay, but also made side money from selling stuff used for the execution, like bits of rope and fabric and stuff. Edit. There's a book called Lord High Executioner by Howard Engel that goes into the history of it, and it's fascinating. Also got money from the prisoners or their family to make it a clean killing. More common during beheading. Of course, they also bribed to make it not so clean. Killing, again beheading. Oh oops, I had a heavy night drinking last night and my aim is not good. Gonna take me a few tries to get this head off. The people in medieval times would empty pots of shit and piss right out their window. If you stop and think about it for like 2 seconds, this idea is so fucking bizarre that it is surprising it became such a popular myth. I remember clearly being told this as fact by my 4th grade history teacher. Urine was collected, aged and used in making textiles, leather and clothes washing in those times. Probably other things too, but I could only remember these. The Confederacy during the Civil War also collected urine to make or extract potassium nitrate, which is a component of black powder. I heard recently that the reason Columbus had trouble finding funding for his voyages had nothing to do with the powers that be believing the Earth was flat. In fact, it was pretty well accepted by that point that it was spherical. However, they believed it was much bigger than Columbus believed it was, and that there would be nothing but ocean for thousands of miles. They thought the journey would cost much more than he was trying to say. He was wrong, and the fact that he ran into the Americas was just luck for him. That MSG is bad for you. When I was a kid back in the early 90s, I remember that was a big thing my parents and friends' parents would talk about. This one right here. They used to say MSG would give you headaches and could make you unwell. It was referred to as Chinese restaurant syndrome. The actual truth is that it was never bad. It was all anti-Asian propaganda mixed with some bad science. Inflammatory headlines and book titles followed. Chinese food make you crazy? MSG is #1 suspect, wrote the Chicago Tribune, while books titled Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills, and In Bad Taste, The MSG Symptom Complex, prompted FDA reviews and 60 Minutes investigations, as Alan Levinovitz, a professor of Chinese philosophy at James Madison University, chronicled in a 2015 book about food myths. But those early studies had essential flaws, including that participants knew whether or not they were consuming MSG. Subsequent research has found that the vast majority of people, even those claiming a sensitivity to MSG, don't have any reaction when they don't know they are eating it.